Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. So welcome to part 2 of this episode with Jessica Hekman. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, then you can find it as the last episode in whatever you listen to this show on, and we encourage you to go back and check that out. Jessica Hekman, DVM PhD, is a veterinary genetics researcher who is fascinated by dog behavior. She works at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard as a computational biologist, of which you can learn what that means in part 1, studying the genetics of behavior in pet and working dogs through the Darwin's ARC project and the Working Dogs Project. She teaches behavioral biology at the Virginia Tech Online Masters Program for Applied Animal Behavior and Welfare. She also offers webinars online and consults with breeders about genetic testing and breeding choices. She's one of the founders of the Functional Dog Collaborative, which you can find out more about at functionalbreeding.org, a nonprofit which seeks to change the conversation around dog breeding in the dog-loving community. Jessica lives in Raymond, New Hampshire with her husband and 3 dogs. So Jessica, welcome back to part 2.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
We left part 1 talking about your goals with the Functional Dog Collaborative, and that conversation focused heavily on genetics and breeding, but we also started to talk about socialization, and do I understand that that's a big part of the project as well, or at least inviting conversations about suitable antecedent arrangement for young dogs?
Yeah, so one of the things that we want to do is to be able to provide educational opportunities for breeders, which could look like a lot of different things, which would certainly include information about genetics and mate selection, but definitely also it would include information about how you raise and manage the puppies for the first 8 or 12 weeks or however long the breeder has them. We want to be able to help with sort of all parts of the world of being a breeder. And socialization is, of course, massively important. There's so many interesting conversations going on about it right now as well. So we are working on a sort of text-based curriculum for breeders, which right now is an outline, and then a few parts of the outline are filled in. And the idea is that would sort of let you know what the different resources are out there. So for socialization, we actually have a bit on, I think it's actually on behavior evaluations for puppies, but related. So, so it would sort of point to the different options that are out there, like puppy culture or Avidog or, other options, and then give some sort of pros or cons about why might you choose one in these situations and why might you choose the other in these situations, and so sort of empower people to make their own choices. I could imagine that we might also be addressing some of these questions like, would you do early neurological stimulation or would you not, and in what circumstances would you do it? So that is the breeder curriculum, and then we're really working hard right now on getting to a place where we could have webinars. And so again, that would cover a whole lot of different topics, but I could definitely see having someone on to talk about socialization and, what to do when and how to make different decisions about it. But it's definitely crucial. You can do all your health testing and, pick your parents brilliantly, but produce a litter that doesn't do well in the world if you don't socialize them. So.
And you said neurological stimulation. What is neurological stimulation?
Early neurological stimulation, or ENS, is a particular protocol that a lot of breeders use. For a long time, I considered it not that I necessarily thought it was a thing that a breeder needed to do to be a good breeder, but that it was a good marker that if a breeder did that, it meant they were really sort of giving it their all. But these days, there's sort of questions about when to use it, so it's more nuanced. But that came out of the U.S. Department of Defense, did some research in like the 60s, I want to say, 1960s, where they came up with this protocol, which they called the Superdog Protocol, which is now known as early neurological stimulation, or ENS. And basically, it is a protocol that you use to interact with very young puppies. So this is like the first sort of 2 or 3 weeks of life. And you're doing these things to sort of mildly annoy them. And these things like tickling their toes and having them stand on cold surfaces and things, holding them upside down briefly. And the idea is that the puppy learns to overcome minor challenges when they are very young, that if the world is a completely comfortable, safe place from day one, and then all of a sudden as an adult the puppy has challenges, that they won't be prepared to deal with it, but that if you stimulate them neurologically early on to understand that there are challenges in the world, but that they can overcome those challenges, that should help them grow up to be a really resilient dog. So the U.S. Department of Defense did this work, and there's a paper with the protocol published, but they didn't publish their methods, how they tested it, how they validated it, what their actual findings were, and it hasn't ever really been fully tested to know if it works. And so breeders are sort of in this place of, well, it sounds like it makes sense. Does it make sense? So a lot of breeders do it. There's sort of this question these days of, maybe if dogs already have some stress in their lives, maybe you don't need to add on to that. So, the question, like if, for example, an orphaned litter that were transferred to a new mom, or even raised by the breeder without a mom, you probably would not need to do early neurological stimulation. On top of that, because they already are suffering some pretty severe challenges and you don't need to add on to that, would be one hypothesis. And no one really knows what the right thing to do is. But that's what ENS is.
So the Department of Defense was studying this on dogs?
Military working dogs, right. Yeah. So they were breeding dogs to be in the U.S. military, and they wanted to be able to breed really resilient ones, and they wanted dogs that they could send into war zones that would not go to pieces. Canine PTSD is a problem, just like human PTSD. So they wanted to be able to breed more resilient dogs.
And so with this project, and let's focus on North America, specifically on the US, but if you have knowledge about Canada, then please put it in there, or if you have knowledge about the rest of the world, and because obviously every country is different with regards to the question I'm about to ask. Are you coming up against legislative challenges here? Like, is there legislation to help support your mission, or is it a barrier to what you want to do, or is it a work in progress? How does it fit into that?
Yeah, so there's definitely legislation going on in the world. The approach that we take, the FTC, is that we would like for breeders to find ways to do the right thing by their own choices. I personally don't believe legislation is the best way to change behavior, but there definitely is legislation out there. There are proposed spay-neuter laws, particularly in parts of the U.S., that sort of to encourage or to legislate that people with more than a certain number of dogs have to spay or neuter them. That you can't have more than a certain number of dogs as a breeding population, to try to legislate against high volume breeders. There's a really interesting piece of legislation which I would have read more about if I'd known you were going to ask this question, but I'll try to do the best I can, out of Norway very recently that they have made a rule that there may be no more breeding of two specific breeds, and I can't remember what the actual breeds were, but they were both brachycephalic. In other words, their faces were very flat. So brachycephaly, having a flat face, is closely correlated with having breathing issues. And a lot of these dogs can't breathe right their whole lives. To sort of feel what that's like, you can try pinching your nose 3/4 of the way shut so that you have very narrow nostrils, like many of these dogs do, and just see what that feels like. Or you could think about what it's like when you're really congested and you're trying to sleep with your mouth shut, but you can't breathe through your nose. So Norway has forbidden purebreds of these breeds to be bred, but they can still be outcrossed, which could be a way of lengthening the muzzle a bit, opening up the nostrils a bit. There's been some interesting debate back and forth about whether this was the right way of doing it. They've basically said that the dogs can't be bred through the breed club, is my understanding, and there's some question of whether the breed club would actually have been a good route to support an outcross. I definitely don't live in Norway and don't know all of the details, so I sort of don't have an opinion about it one way or the other, in that I don't personally think legislation's the right way, but maybe this will work for them, maybe this was the right legislation, maybe it wasn't. There's a lot of different opinions out there. I guess time will tell whether this produces changes in those populations of dogs or not.
My thoughts were, during real or not parallels between dog training and dog breeding, in that to be a dog trainer you don't need any qualifications or certifications, or in lots of parts of the world. I'm thinking about New Zealand as I'm saying this, but
it's true here too,
right?
Yeah.
And so that's something that's discussed, and there's conversations about in dog training circles, and it made me, along the same lines but a different question, wonder about if there's nothing to say you have to do things this way, no regulations you have to follow. I'm assuming that there's opposition to some of the principles and goals that your organisation has by people that aren't motivated by the health, genetically or behaviourally, of dogs, but have more of a financial incentive.
Yeah, I would say, so I think you are talking, people with a financial incentive, I think you're basically talking about high volume breeders. And I don't think they feel threatened by us because, well, I'm not sure they know that we exist. The high volume breeders who are really out there to make money and who don't really care about the health of the dogs that they're producing. I mean, I will admit that I don't think I have knowingly interacted with anyone in that role and been able to ask them about what they think about the FDC. And there's a range, right? So there are certainly people who are breeding high volume who would be interested in accessing some resources to understand how to do it with more animal welfare in mind. But if we're talking about the people who really just, like, it's just about the money and they really don't care about the welfare, I'm not sure how much we threaten them. I think they recognize that there is a massive demand for dogs out there right now, and they are filling it. And if they weren't filling it, people would not be acquiring dogs, right? Like, people would have multi-year waiting lists, and some people would be just not getting dogs if we were to able to sort of just magically entirely shut down high volume breeding, which is something very troubling to me, that I really want every dog to be produced. I want every dog to be bred with the best possible start in life. I want it to be set up to succeed. I want it to have parents who had a life similar to what this dog is going to have, so that it's inheriting, qualities of dogs who are appropriate for that life, and I wanted those dogs to have really good socialization and be, in the case of pets, to be really prepared to live in homes and be what people expect them to be. And I don't believe that really high volume breeding is the way to do that. But I also recognize that shelter dogs are no longer fulfilling the voracious need that at least Americans have for pet dogs as they used to be doing. I mean, there used to be more than enough shelter dogs to do that, and there are not anymore. And the hobby breeders breeding a litter a year or a litter every other year are also not going to fulfill that need. And there are just millions of dogs that people want. And how hard should it be for someone to get a dog is a question. Do we want it to be that only the elite have dogs and that it takes a 3-year waiting list to get a dog? Like, that's not a world that I look forward to. But right now we are depending on the high volume breeders. So I don't think that they are feeling threatened by us. The group of which there are some people who don't seem to like us are the people who are often who feel strongly about purebreds, and that the purebred standard defines what the dog should be, and that the stud book defines the breed, and that if you are breeding dogs across breeds, that is something that should be avoided at all costs, that outcrossing should be avoided at all costs, and that mixed breed breeders are inevitably doing it only for money and not doing a good job of it, and that there's no way to breed crossbred dogs I've been told on Facebook there is no way to breed a crossbred dog responsibly, and I've been laughed at when I said that I have friends who do it. So that group of people, which is not all purebred breeders, but there are a subset of purebred breeders who do seem to feel strongly that way, and those seem to be the people who are not happy about us doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that your skill set and experience in managing and moderating this Facebook group and what you learned in your year at the shelter, doing, I can't remember what it was, your kind of postdoc internship, was it?
Intern, yeah.
And you said the thing you had to learn there was people skills and then having those conversations. And it sounds to me like they are the skills that are going to help put that signpost up and build that bridge, and understand what everyone's goals and needs are, and how to create win-win situations for everyone that you want to try and invite into this conversation, which sounds incredibly challenging.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we have this group of moderators who moderate the Facebook group, right? And sometimes someone will come onto the Facebook group and say a thing that could be interpreted in one of multiple ways. And my moderators, who have spent a lot more time on Facebook than I have, sometimes will react saying this person's a troll, by which they mean this person is coming in just to stir up trouble on the group, or they're coming in. This is the thing that people do, is to come in and take screenshots of stuff from the group, and then they go post the screenshots in other groups to make fun of the people in our group. And I have had many situations. Sometimes I'm like, yep, you're right. But there have been many situations where I've been like, I don't think so. I think this person is ready to learn, but is not expressing it well. And I've had multiple situations where I'll go have a long conversation with someone on Facebook, through Messenger. And at the end of it, I'll realize that, yeah, they really did want to learn. Sometimes they come out of that saying that they learned something from the conversation. Sometimes they come out of it, I realize that they had good intentions all along. But it's very time intensive. And if what it takes is for me to have those conversations with everybody who I want to affect in the world, then I definitely will not be having the work-life balance that you and I talked about. So I don't, and yet there's some amount of it just takes talking to people sometimes. So I don't know what the answer is for that. But I still believe, that's part of why I believe that putting people together on that Facebook group is important, that if you are a member of the Facebook group that is in which we go take screenshots of people who have doodles and put them on the group and make fun of them. That there's a specific group that does this. I'm sure there's more than one, but there's a specific one that I'm aware of. And now you come onto my group and you start meeting doodle breeders and talking to them and discovering that they actually, some of them do a really pretty fabulous job. Suddenly they're real people to you, that they weren't real people before, and that's important. But it is a massive amount of work to maintain it, because for everyone who comes in and says, oh, I met this doodle breeder and they're a real person and they're doing a great job and I like them, there's another bunch of people who are not in a place where they want to be open to learning, right, and who just want to come in and yell. And so picking those threads apart is really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, I feel you on that, and I want to support the goals of the organization and your project, and express gratitude for spending that time. I've, as a moderator of an online community, relate to your experience, and I understand you have to kind of decide when it becomes detrimental to the group if a single focus can withdraw all of your resources away from 9,000 other people. It clashes potentially with a group and being able to reach so many people versus doing one-on-one consulting. And is your goal, would you say your goal is to try and connect with purebred breeders who might be criticizing what you're doing or dubious, or is your goal to focus all resources on those who want to learn and are there standing in front of you saying, yeah, I'm here, I'm open to your information, or are you trying to touch both of those areas?
Both, I think. I would say that the primary goal is to provide resources to those who want the resources, but it is part of supporting people who are breeding in certain ways involves starting to change the conversation at a more global level, right? So I had initially had this beautiful rosy view of, I'll just get everybody together and we'll just do our own thing and it'll be fine. Like, we'll just be in our space doing our thing, other people will be in their space doing their thing, and we won't bother each other. And that, I think, was overly optimistic, a bit naive. I think it is just very hard for different groups of people to interact, and there's just a really widespread perception in our society that breeding crossbred dogs is inherently a bad thing to do. And I was on the crossbreeder safe space that we made recently, one of the doodle breeders, she does such a lovely job with her dogs, and she was saying recently, does anyone else have this fear? I'm afraid to leave my doodles alone at a groomer. I had to learn to groom them myself because I'm worried that the groomer will be rough with them because they are doodles. And I had to say, I don't think she's wrong. Like, that may sound crazy to someone who hasn't experienced this, but again, like, I'm on these other groups where the group that I talked about, where they basically, the purpose of the group is to make fun of doodle people. A large percentage of the people on that group are groomers, which I understand where they're coming from, right? Like, there's a lot of doodle owners who don't understand how to maintain that coat. The coat is challenging to maintain. They let the dog mat up. They bring it into the groomer. The groomer has to shave the dog down to its skin. The person gets angry at the groomer. The groomer gets angry at the person. Now the groomer is not happy about doodle owners in general or doodle breeders. So I get how that happens. But I also get that my friend is afraid to leave her dog with a groomer who has this anger. And so that whole tangle has to be untangled, and somehow I guess I have taken it upon myself to say that our group will do it. Not this year, at some point, but that's the kind of thing that we're trying to figure out how to make easier for responsible breeders that we're supporting, I think we have to support them in all walks of life, and that does seem to mean starting to try to run some interference to change their minds, to change that global conversation, to say that there's lots of different ways of being a responsible breeder, not just this one way.
Was that an intentional pun to say that we have to untangle the doodle?
No, good job. No, it wasn't, but it was a good one.
So I think with everything you've said thus far in part 2 and what you said in part 1, we can understand the goal clearly to create more genetically healthy dogs and provide suitable antecedent arrangements when they are young. And I think you've done a wonderful job of defining what the problem is as you see it, that motivates this goal and the goal of your organisation. So firstly, thank you for sharing everything thus far. And I'm really excited now because you've compiled for us a lineup of 5 things that a lot of the listeners of this show can do, what professionals can do to help the dog community and industry move towards this goal. So if you will, can we dive into this lineup? What is number 1?
Yes. So number 1 is to help spread this narrative that we've been talking about, that crossbreeding can be done well or it can be done badly. Pure breeding can be done well or badly. So it's not about, crossbreeding is not inherently bad. It's about the methods that someone uses to breed. So helping to spread that narrative in the world. And you see this on social media all the time, and just standing up and answering it when you see it. Say, they're not necessarily a bad breeder because they breed doodles. If they don't health test, they're a bad breeder. But if there's more to breeding than just whether it's purebred versus crossbreeding.
So as professionals, is that to help guide clients to your resources to help them find suitable breeders, or is that for professionals to be part of your Facebook group so that when they have clients who might be searching for a new puppy, they can use your resources to help those clients out? How do you see that best serving?
So what I was thinking was just very much when you're having a conversation with someone, when you're on social media, when you're in person, just push back on the narrative that crossbreeding is bad. I mean, it comes up all the time. I was on a panel recently where someone started saying stuff to that effect. So just push back where you can. My point number 4, which we can jump to, was going to be to help people sort of work through what we call risk mitigation in terms of seeking puppies. So trying to help people find the most appropriate puppy for them that they can find, and recognizing that may not be the perfect breeder that we would imagine, because they may not be able to find such a breeder that will get them a puppy within the next 3 to 6 years. So not letting perfection be the enemy of good enough, but talking through the options. And we do have resources to help people with that. We're in the middle actually of figuring out, I wanted to sort of say, like, here's what we do for puppy seekers. We call them puppy seekers. Here's what we do for puppy seekers. We're in the middle of figuring that out. We currently do have a Facebook group that people, it's invite only, but if people wanted to reach out through the Functional Dog Collaborative Facebook page, we'd be able to get them in there. It's not clear if that group is going to change in some way. We're sort of trying to think about how to approach that long term, but we definitely will always have resources for people for this kind of thing. It's very important. So, yeah, you guys, I said point 1 and your question sort of brought us to point 4.
And what kind of people are in that puppy seeking group, and do you find that across that group and across the 9,000 individual group that you're bringing all of these different parties together, do you find you have many professional trainers in that space?
There are a lot of professional trainers on the main group. Which is really interesting to me, that there's I would say maybe even a third of the people on the main group are trainers of some sort, people who are there because they perceive problems. and that they want to see what the solutions to the problems are, even if they are not themselves breeders. In the puppy seekers group, we limit it to people who are looking for puppies. Again, I'm trying to figure out what the future of it will be, and so we're talking about the possibility of, at least we have one person, Jacqueline George, who one of our most active volunteers, who as her own career works at matchmaking people and wanted to start and run this group partly as a way to learn more about what kinds of problems puppy seekers were encountering, but as sort of payment for people for giving her that information. She's also helping train them in the group what kinds of questions to ask breeders and how to figure out what's actually going on with the breeder. You know, what are situations where you should stop and say this is a risk, and then if you want to move forward anyways, how do you mitigate that risk? I don't think personally that she can continue to do this all herself. She's doing such a fantastic job. I think the group is going to grow to a point where she also has a poor work-life balance. So one of the things that we're hoping to talk about is getting some support for her. And I could certainly see dog training professionals being really good candidates to provide that support for her.
Yeah, that's a cool collaboration. What kind of your description there of what Jacqueline does, and thank you, Jacqueline, for the hard work. I got her name right, Jacqueline?
Yes.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for the hard work you're doing.
Yes.
What kind of questions should professionals, or if you're not a professional and you're listening to this podcast, and because we do have a lot of people who are really interested in animal training and behaviour, but might not be professionals, and as they might be navigating into a space of acquiring a new family member, a new dog into their lives, what kind of questions should we be asking breeders?
Yeah, well, you should ask her. She would talk through health testing. So we're talking about like because there's checklists online already about how you can find an ideal breeder, but they often are not really realistic. So does the breeder health test is a typical one. So she's pretty good about picking that apart and thinking about what does that actually mean. One thing that we often fail to say is, does the breeder health test and what do they do with the results of the health testing? Because you can health test and just ignore the results, right? And breed the dog with terrible hips anyways. So ask the breeder, do you health test? What were the results? What did you decide to do based on those results? What health tests should the breeder actually be doing? That's a surprisingly challenging one. So the traditional advice there is to go to the breed club for the breed that you're interested in and see what the breed club recommends. There's two problems with that. One problem is, well, if you have mixed breeds, there's no breed club. So the answer for something like a golden doodle might be you should do all the health tests for golden retrievers and all the health tests for poodles. But how to interpret the results can be challenging. So if they're a carrier for a golden retriever disease, is that a problem if you're breeding it to a poodle? Probably not, and depending on the disease. So how you handle the results of the health tests can be challenging. And then if it's a multi-generation mix, so we have people who are breeding pet dogs and they know what breeds are in there, but maybe one of the breeds is in there at 10%, 5% of the dog's total breed makeup. Do they need to do all the health tests for that 5%? I don't think that's meaningful in any way. So then what health tests do we recommend? And then the other question is whether we even agree with what breed clubs recommend. Some breed clubs are excellent and recommend a large swath of health tests to be done and considered for to responsibly breed dogs with that breed, and others don't. And so how do you know if the breed that you're looking at, if that breed club is sort of missing a couple of key tests, and many of the breeders know that this particular disease, which can be tested for, is in the breed, but it's sort of not said, it's sort of this unspoken knowledge. How do you find that out? It can be really challenging for people to find things like that out before they get into the breed. So navigating things like that, navigating how are the puppies socialized? Again, do they do puppy culture? Yes, no, check, okay, done. Well, are there other options? Maybe they're doing things on their own, but you can talk through what they're doing. So all that sort of nuance around thinking through what the breeders are doing, and that also presumes good faith on the part of the breeder. I had no idea until I started talking to Jacqueline that there are so many of these breeders that you and I talked about in part one, who are high volume and really just out to get money, who have learned to do a very good job of pretending to look like something they are not. They do an excellent job of doctoring health test results, so they don't have to do the health test, which is expensive. They can just have it done for one animal, or borrow from a friend and then doctor the results to look like it's this animal. They can, even if you say, I would like to go meet the dog at the home where it is raised, Jacqueline let me know that it has even been done for someone to pay a friend to have the litter, basically for the last week before the litter is sold. And so you come to this house and see this litter in the house and the dog in the house, but you don't know that the litter was actually born and raised for their first 7 weeks or whatever in filthy conditions in high volume kennels. That is apparently a thing that people do. So helping people navigate those kinds of issues as well.
I can see why you would want to pay a Jacqueline to do this rather than doing it yourself.
Yes.
Is Jacqueline unique in her role, or is this something that people can access easily in different parts of the world?
I know that there are other people out there with an interest in this. We have another volunteer, Bailey Renner, who works closely with Jacqueline, who's also excellent at this kind of work. I have been told that there are other people, often trainers, who do this kind of work. I've also been told that they tend to find it challenging to convince people to pay for it. Jacqueline does this free of charge for people. She is self-funded. Certainly that is a challenge I think we're going to have to figure out through the FTC, because I want to be able to pay people to do this. And I think that means that we're going to have to charge for the service. And I haven't figured out how to make that work. I mean, that's part of the conversation that we're having is, if we have this group where we're sort of mentoring people through figuring out this process, like, is money going to change hands? I don't know. But I know that it is something that people all around the world understand very well is needed. And I know that a lot of people are trying to do it, and I have not seen anyone who is doing it in large volume successfully, in a sustainable way. And maybe I'm wrong. If someone out there is, I would love to hear from them.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. And so if you listen to this podcast, then please get in touch with Jessica. So we jumped from 1 to 4. Let's potentially head back to number 2.
So number 2, closely related to number 1, is just to really support people who are doing crossbreeding or outcrossing, both online and in person. Recognizing that it can actually be scary for someone with a doodle to show up at a dog training club or a dog training class. Often, particularly if it's a dog training club where there's the sort of introductory pet manners classes, are often people who are not deeply into the dog world, and they may not have negative perceptions of crossbreeders. But once you start getting into like obedience, agility, those types of sports, the makeup of those classes starts changing over to people who are very invested in the dog world. And again, something I didn't realize until I started talking to people who produce doodles and other crossbreds, but particularly doodles are just there's a perception about doodles that people who breed and own them are irresponsible. And I didn't realize that doodle breeders actually can find it really challenging to move into these spaces. They can receive pushback from the people that they interact with. They can feel not welcomed by the people they interact with. So I think that is again, something pretty straightforward. If you are offering dog training classes, and just be aware of what the makeup of the class is. And if it's, if there are people in the class who are sort of more involved in the dog world, you don't know what their perceptions will be. If there's also someone with a purposefully bred mix in the class, just keep an eye on it. Be aware that the person with the mix may be not sure of how they're going to be welcomed, with or without reason. Like that, the other people in the class may be perfectly lovely, but that doesn't meet the dog. The person coming with the mix may not have any way of knowing that. So just make sure the person with the mix feels welcome. Keep an eye on the interactions between them and other people. Just make sure that you are providing a welcoming and supportive environment for people coming in with different types of dogs.
So number 1, number 2, number 3, they're all based at people-to-people interactions. And so we haven't done 3 and 5, but that seems to be the hurdles potentially to overcome here is...
Yes.
It's not...
Social.
Right. So I don't know if you watched the movie recently, Don't Look Up. I won't go down that rabbit hole. So the information's there, the question's there, the curiosity is there. What needs to be built on is the treating of each other using the behaviour science we use with our dogs. Being kind, being gentle, being understanding, listening.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking away so far from this list. Is that how you thought about it?
Yep. I would say that points 1 and 2 are 100% about that. About, yes, being kind, friendly, accepting, positive, and also being aware that there may be others around you who are not, and just sort of standing up for people if they need it. For points 3 and 5, those are more. So point 3 was more not about individuals so much as about institutions, and just trying to push back a bit on if you are involved in a breed club, to try to advocate for, if someone wants to breed a dog from your breed to another dog of a different breed. Many breed clubs have written into their code of ethics that if anyone does that, they will be removed from the club. Or even that if they sell a puppy to someone who's intending to breed to another breed, they'll be removed from the club. And I would encourage anyone who has any kind of say in the culture of breed clubs to push back on that kind of approach to hanging on to the breed so tightly, to recognizing that you can breed dogs in the way that makes the most sense to you, but it is a benefit to the world to allow other people to breed dogs the way that makes the most sense to them. And I've talked to a lot of breeders who have really strong visceral emotions about this and tried to understand. And what I've heard is, why, we've done this work to produce this breed. Why should we let other people use it? And to me, I feel like, well, why wouldn't you want to help other people have projects that do really cool things building off of your breed? And then there's a pool of dogs related to your breed, but already with other genetics in them. That would be an ideal source if the time came that you wanted to outcross. I think that is often not the winning argument with people who don't want to think about outcrossing, though. But I guess it does tie back into my points 1 and 2 that for a lot of people, this is a really emotional feeling of, I've created this breed, which is this perfect representation of what I want to produce. And I don't want anyone out there creating something else from it. Trying to change that perspective, trying to encourage breed clubs to let other people use their resources, and maybe talk through as well about the importance of outcross. If you are a member of a breed club that is for a breed that has a lot of genetic problems that are even limiting lifespan and health span, start bringing up that concept of maybe we should have a way of supporting an outcross project. Those of us who are not interested in breeding to outcrossed dogs do not have to do so. But the breed club could support bringing outcrossed dogs in for those of us who are interested. And for the owners out there, so the people who are not deeply involved in a particular breed but still feel that this is my breed and the kind of dog that I want to get, many of those people are desperate for outcrossed dogs. They don't care if they look exactly like that breed, but they do care at what age they are going to live to. So point 3, working with breed clubs to try to change perceptions. And I think that's something that not everyone who's listening to this has the standing with breed clubs to do that. But those who do, that would be my ask for them.
Yeah, you said it's an emotional subject, and you said that this is a global impact. It's with regards to the genetics of dogs in 20 years from now or 50 years from now. It's got an impact on that. And you've said that there's different opinions here between different camps, which are the 3 ingredients of a crucial conversation. These are hard conversations to have, and it makes me think about my time spent in training and working with trainers and those trainers who go to a club, a dog training club, where the club's advocating for the use of aversives. And I know the emotional toll that can take on those trainers that make a decision to advocate in that space. And you talked about the importance of relationships. Any other tips there for someone listening to this show who might be in this exact position and have an opportunity to advocate? And what do you have to say to those people? Because it's a big decision, I think, to invest in that.
That is the hardest question you've asked me this whole time.
I got there, finally.
Read the book Crucial Conversations. It's hard. I mean, I recognize that someone who is advocating for these things is walking a fine line. And if you push too fast, too hard, you will lose your access and people will stop talking to you because people feel so strongly. And so it does come down also to giving people information when they are ready and interested in hearing it. Not telling people things that they're not ready to hear and then sort of continuing to feed them information that they're not interested in absorbing. But finding those people who are interested and helping support their journey. So maybe I might say, I guess I'd say maybe the best way is to have careful conversations as you are, getting together with other members of your breed club, sort of gently float the idea, see how someone responds, the concept of outcrossing, see if someone responds with really strong negative emotions. That's not probably the person to engage with. But starting to float those ideas out there and starting to pull together, are there other people who are interested in talking more? You can find the person who says, I mean, I've heard that outcrossing might be important, and I don't know myself. I've been thinking about how important. I don't really, have the details, but I don't feel that strongly about it. That could be someone who you could start talking to, helping them go, do the work of learning about whether it's indicated now in their breed. I'll say some breeds right now are desperate for it. All of them are going to need it at some point. You can't just close a population off and expect there never to be genetic diversity problems. And the sooner you start mixing in new genes, the easier it's going to be to spread them throughout the population. But not all breeds are in desperate need immediately. But start having those conversations with the people who are ready to hear them.
And do you find in your Facebook group lending support for people in that position? Is that one use of your Facebook group for?
Yes. Right. So, for example, say you're in a breed club and you're aware that there is someone who is working on an outcross project with that breed. It is not sanctioned by the breed club. And perhaps you are aware that there are other people in the breed club who have very strong negative emotions about this project. You could simply reach out to the person who is running this outcross project and tell them, I'm so glad you're doing this. This is really important work. You can send them a private message saying that. I 100% guarantee that will be a really valuable boost for them that day or week or month. Many of these people are getting only really negative feedback from other people in their preferred breed. And hearing something positive from someone else saying, I'm really glad you're doing this, thank you. Thank you. That's huge for someone who's getting so many unpleasant interactions.
I like it. Number 5.
Volunteer for the FTC.
You will be paid, won't you?
It's a bit self-serving. But we can use you almost certainly. You and I have talked about some of the more highly trained volunteer jobs along the lines of figuring out, learning how to connect people with the right dogs for them. And if you're interested in that, we would love to have people with dog knowledge, dog trainers, help out with that. If you are good at writing, we would love your help putting together the breeder curriculum. You don't have to know anything about breeding. We have plenty of breeders who can help with that actual information, but we need people to put it down on the page. If you're good at social media, we could use your help with social media outreach. So if you're interested in this project, reach out to me, join the group for a while and see if it's your cup of tea. But there's a lot that can be done, and we definitely could use more hands.
Awesome. So number 1, help spread this narrative. Number 2, support people who are doing crossbreeding. Number 3, advocate for it if appropriate and relevant to do so. Number 4, help people work through risk mitigation with the acquisition of new family members. Number 5, volunteer for the FTC. How'd I go?
That's perfect. We could save number 5 if you wanted to volunteer for another group of your choosing. I'd be okay with that too.
Well, thank you for sharing everything over these 2 episodes, Jessica. I think it's potentially obvious to the listeners of the show what you want to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years, but maybe let's hear it in your words in a summarized way, what you want to see happening moving forward, and Sasha, or any final thoughts on everything we've talked about over the last 2 episodes.
Yeah. I keep saying I want to change the conversation. I would love to see the conversation change. I would love it if when someone goes to look for their next family member, they had better resources to help them think through what kind of dog they want and who to go to. I would love for there to be more breeders out there for them to go to. And we didn't even really get, well, we talked a bit about the number of high volume breeders, sort of high volume, low responsibility breeders that are out there sort of filling the gaps. But I would love to start seeing the people who are doing a couple litters a year or maybe doing it to make some pocket money and are happy to learn more and do it better. I would love to see those people connected to us or to other groups, and for it to be easier for puppy seekers to find them and for them to have excellent resources available to them to make it easier for them to really produce fabulous dogs that fit into homes really well. I would love for people to have this perspective of what good breeding is, that we don't have to settle for dogs with a lifespan of 6 to 9 years, as is true in some breeds, but that there's ways we can do better, and to have those ways start becoming the norm.
Wonderful. I think the approximations and all of the hard work and time that you and your volunteers have and continue to put in are definitely moving the needle closer. I'm sure on a yearly basis, a monthly basis, and every little thing you do on a daily basis, this podcast episode. So celebrating all of the approximations taken thus far, and liking a description of that end goalpost, so we know that the direction we're going and what approximations that you've outlined for us in these 2 episodes are valuable for us to consider, and I'm sure they'll change and modify and evolve over time. Where can people go online? Can you remind us to find out more about this project, everything else you're doing, and get in touch?
Yeah, functionalbreeding.org is the website. There's a lot of information about the project there. It links to the Facebook group, which is the Functional Breeding group. There's also a Facebook page, so I think it's like facebook.com/functionalbreeding, and you can message the page to get in contact with either me or a moderator. You can also go to the website and there's a contact us form, so there's plenty of ways to get in touch. But I would say there's a lot of information to read on the website. There's a lot of, again, I keep forgetting to pimp the podcast, but there's a lot of old podcast episodes which have a lot of information. And then you can also join the group and join the conversation there.
Fantastic. And we will, of course, link to all of that in our show notes as well for you listening. Jessica, this has been informative and fun from myself, and on behalf of everyone listening, we appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been a lot of fun for me as well.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behaviour geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.